Welcome to Between Over and Next with your hosts, Holli and Robert, a happily married couple who explore the space between what was, what is, and what's to come. From career changes to navigating life's uncertainties, this dynamic duo will empower you to live your happiest life at every age and stage. So, get ready because your journey with Holli and Robert starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Between Over and Next. Hi, Holli.
Hi, Robert. I love reconnecting with people that have been part of our journey professionally.
Well, today we reach into our Rolodex once again.
Well, today's Rolodex is known as LinkedIn. And I saw some really great posts by Amy Wilkins. And we know Amy from Martha Stewart Weddings.
Right. We met Amy back in 2011. Well, probably before that. And back in our Wedding Podcast Network days.
Which started in 2005, right?
Right.
So the reason Robert mentioned 2011 is because we produced an awesome hybrid event, one of the first of its kind, called the 21st Century Bride. And that was a B2B event focused on marketing for wedding professionals. And we had reached out to Amy back then to participate in the event. And she was so awesome. She gave us an amazing giveaway. She gave us a fabulous presentation to share with our attendees.
The reason that we had decided to put this on was because even though we were 10 plus years into the new decade and the new millennia, the whole Y2K, right? People were in a panic technologically. And as we started to move into the digital age of marketing to brides, to couples, it was still relatively new. And certainly people were not nearly as comfortable with technology and the digital space as they are now, for sure. So that was the impetus. And to have the selection of professionals that we had participating in this was really phenomenal. And we're still to this day very, very proud of that.
And at the time, Amy was the senior vice president of Martha Stewart Weddings.
Correct.
When we met her.
Right.
Today's episode, we invited Amy Wilkins to be our featured guest, and she made a number of pivots in her career. And most recently, she is a leadership coach, which is where we connected with her personally at a networking event with other coaches.
So we're really excited to have Amy on the show today, and we're really thrilled to have reconnected with her, and we're looking forward to sharing her insight with you.
Hi, Amy. We're so happy you're here with us today.
I'm so happy to be with you.
And we're looking forward to sharing your story because we just recently reconnected since 21st Century Bride, right, Robert?
Yeah, it's unbelievable, 2011.
In the world of weddings, when you were at Martha Stewart Weddings, and a lot's happened.
Oh, yes.
Since then.
There has been many things that have happened since then.
And lots of pivots, which we like to talk about on Between Over and Next. So we're really thrilled that you are our featured guest today.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about why you entered the world of publishing and media?
So the quick answer is it looked like I would eat regular. I'm not going to lie. I remember I worked at an advertising agency. And it was great. I loved it, but the salary was so low that, like, back then, ladies' night, they served wings on Wednesdays. I mean, that was my protein for the week. But what happened was really extraordinary. The media director, John Reed, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to thank him years later. He came into my office one day, shut the door. Imagine I still had an office even though I couldn't eat regular. But he shut the door and he said, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there's a job open in the city at Newsweek. I don't know that you're quite ready for it, but I really think you'd be great in sales. That was all it took. I didn't get the job. The woman who I interviewed with was a reference for my next job, which was fascinating. And what I did, though, literally, I think it was maybe 2 weeks later, I took a week vacation. I went to New York and I had 19 informational interviews in 1 week. I'm like, I'm doing this. Somebody who bought media from me said, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be in sales. She's like, we have a job. And next thing I know, I'm in New York. So it started with, I would like to actually be able to pay my bills, my student loans. That's really how it started. I'm not going to lie. But I loved it. Not immediately, because that first role was not a great fit, but I ended up having so many people along the way provide me with, hey, I think you'd be good for this. I remember I stayed in that job literally 10 months and then went somewhere else, and it was an amazing experience. And then I started to see that there was something about that world that actually was very suited to me. I need things to be different and varied. I can't do the same thing every day, and sales isn't the same thing every day. I mean, you might be selling the same thing every day, but you're not selling it to the same people. You're coming with different ideas. So I immediately saw like, wow, this is way more than I get to eat regular.
Where did you go to school and what did you hope to be when you grew up?
Well, I went to school at Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass. It's actually where I met my husband. I studied psychology. So psychology works with advertising. It works with that whole world. It works in sales, right? It's actually kind of fitting. I think originally I thought I want to be a therapist or I want to be a psychologist. And I thought maybe I'm not ready for that because I'm an empath. So I can actually get too invested in that. And I thought, let's pivot that and go in a different direction. So I aimed for advertising.
Well, it's interesting because when you started, to be in publishing
Yeah.
was the thing. Not so much anymore, certainly traditional publishing.
Yeah.
But did you even realize, as you started to embark on these roles, that it was somewhat of a prestigious industry?
I don't think I was thinking of it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that when I went to Health magazine, I was a baby. They were partially owned by Time Inc. They were ranked 3 in the category. We were a launch. And I went there because the people that I interviewed with are amazing. And I got this feeling that I was going to learn a lot. When I get bored, I need to move. And sometimes you're in environments where you can move and stay.
Right.
And sometimes you're in environments where if you want to move, you got to go. And the place I was in right before that, I had to go. It was Time Inc. And yeah, that was a prestigious publishing organization. But I think I was more focused on what I would get to do and learn and less focused on this is a prestigious industry.
Right.
I think it's common in publishing to move.
Back in the day, it wasn't. And I remember health was my 4th job, and I was 27.
Mm.
Now, that today is normal,
Right.
right? Back then, it wasn't. But for me, I was always like, if I'm not learning, if this environment is not conducive to me growing, and if these people are not behind me, I'm out. And the sooner I get out, the better. So it's got to be either of those things. If I'm bored as you know what, or if somebody's not looking at me saying, we want her to be successful, then it's not worth it.
So you were 8 years at Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia. Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
It was an interesting time to actually be at Martha Stewart because we were in a rebuilding mode and also an exciting time. For me, that environment, there were some really, really great things about it. And there were also some challenging things about it. In the 8 years I was there, I had 7 bosses. That's a lot of change. And it's not that I hadn't been in environments where I'd had change before, but that was a lot of adjusting, right? And as a leader, it's your job to figure out how you're going to work with that person. They're not necessarily looking at you saying, I'm going to adjust how I operate for you. You have to think about how am I going to be and lead with this person as my boss. Yeah. But what was amazing about that environment was it's insanely creative. It was impossible not to love that. I think Martha is probably the most curious person on the planet. I really do. I admire that about her. And as somebody who is curious, I want to be around people like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I love that. Share some of your defining moments that shaped your career while you were at Martha Stewart.
So early on when I got there, I mean, you guys might remember we had the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And when I came into Martha Stewart, I was on 2 brands. And we had to make a very brave and bold decision to cease one of them. And that was Blueprint, which I still to this day, I'm just,
What a beautiful
mean,
publication,
yeah.
cover to cover.
yeah, it was. Everybody on that team was amazing. I do think they had to make that decision. It was like there wasn't going to be a way forward in that climate. I think that's one of the mistakes some organizations make when they hang on to something longer than they know they can support it. So we had to make that decision. So then I was on Everyday Food and Martha Stewart. And I would say I felt schizophrenic, and my team did. I'd have my marketing director come in my office, and I'm like, okay, now we're talking about what's happening in the grocery store. And then I'm like, okay, but what does Cartier need? She would look at me some days and I'm like, okay, yeah, this isn't working. I ended up going to the leadership and saying, I think it would be better if we're going to do this. Somebody should just own food, like throughout the entire ecosystem of Martha Stewart, from product placement on air, digital, print, all of that. Or somebody should own all of weddings, top to bottom, again, digital, print, the whole thing. And that would make more sense. And so that is what happened. But with that, I had to take a pay cut. I had been over a couple of brands and now I wasn't. That was okay. He was like, all right, you know what? Sometimes you have to look at that, especially because we were heading into this horrible climate where it took longer for weddings to slip, but it didn't happen right away. It was a lag. And I remember everybody in the organization, oh, you know, weddings are immune to these kinds of things. I go, I'm not sure if that's true. And sure enough, it was several months in, but all of a sudden we were like, boom. I have to say one thing that was so amazing was Martha was like, how are we going to help all of these people who have been part of it? So we created something in the magazine. It was small space, but we gave away all of these listings for every single client who had ever been with us. It didn't matter how much they'd ever spent with us. It didn't matter how many times they were with us. And I really respected that. I thought she knows we need to do something like this. So the organization supported us making that move. The other thing that happened during that time when the climate was getting scary and ugly and challenging, two other things happened in my personal life that actually ended up creating a thing for me. My husband had fallen, dislocated his kneecap from his patella tendon. That's a 10-month recovery.
Wow.
My daughter was in elementary school, and my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Like, you guys, it was the same week.
That's
That's
tough.
a lot.
That's a lot to
It's
deal
a
with.
lot to handle personally
Yeah.
and to have to show up every day
Yeah. And
for everybody.
yeah, definitely.
Right. And
So-
to not have that affect your work product.
Yeah, and I was feeling disconnected from the leadership and from my coworkers and colleagues. And I also was at a point where I was saying to myself something that I'm sure many people were saying at that time. Oh, well, I better just stick this out, no matter how painful or whatever I'm dealing with, because like there's nothing else out there. And I was like, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for me to think that all that I have to do now or all I get to do is survive something. I need to be able to thrive in that moment. I still to this day think back on that and think that was pretty wise to know that if I could shift to choice, okay, if I'm choosing to stay here, what am I going to choose to do to flip this? And that's when I hired a leadership coach. And her name is Terry Yaffe. To this day, she's somebody I highly regard and love, because what I got during that time was the ability to remove all the stories that I might be making up about anything and just get down to like, what's really happening here? And even though we had 7 bosses in 8 years, half of those transitions were pretty easy for me because I'd gotten to know myself better as a leader and how I was going to show up. Now, I was still doing the work, which is a lifetime thing anyway. We're always working on that. But it was really, really, really powerful.
It's always wonderful when you can learn more about yourself
Yeah.
through the experiences you're having.
Yeah.
And that had to have been a very tough year to get through.
Yeah.
But you did.
Yeah. And very early on, I didn't even feel like I was getting through it. I was like, I'm creating how I'm going to show up forever. thinking how I'm going to look at situations as they arrive. Every situation, no matter what, can be looked at like a gift or an opportunity. Every single one. And that's really powerful to be able to look at it that way, because when something's happening that feels like it's a little bit sideways or not something you wanted to happen, or you're labeling as a bad thing, you can say, wait, is it bad, or am I just about to learn something?
Holly and I talk about this all the time in terms of your emotional readiness to even take that in. Would that have happened at a different part of your career trajectory, do you think? Or was that timed for that moment?
I think it was a little bit of both, because it's possible, right, that if the climate had been different, if my husband hadn't fallen, if my dad wasn't diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that maybe I would have left. Would have been a mistake.
Right. Well, the universe was at work.
Right. I think actually I needed almost all of those things to be happening for me to be able to say, no, I'm going to really dive in and look at myself. Like, this is not anybody else's fault. There's nobody to point a finger at. It's like, what if I just keep doing this, right? What if I keep pointing the finger at myself? Look in the mirror. What is it that I want to do, and how do I want to show up? Because it doesn't just affect me. It affects my team. It affects my colleagues. It affects everybody around me.
You have made a huge transition since your world of media and publishing and leadership.
Yeah.
And having had a coach who
Yeah.
inspired
Yeah.
this path of yours,
Definitely.
you've pivoted. You are now a coach.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit of how you successfully pivoted from those roles of being an employee to entrepreneurship.
I could feel myself getting restless, right? That's something that I've always been able to feel it. And some of that restlessness I noticed was coming from, there were really important things that we needed to do where I was. And I thought, I want someone else doing it. I'm going to lift them up and give them all the tools they need to make this happen. I don't want to say that I didn't care. I cared, but I didn't care to be the one that fixed it or improved it or grew it or expanded. I wanted someone else to do it. And once I knew that, I was like, okay, do what you got to do.
Right.
And the thing that always interested me was supporting the people around me. I've always loved being a leader of teams. I've always loved empowering them, not a micromanager. I like to let people's creativity flourish and bloom, unrestrained. Some parameters, like the budget might not be unlimited, but that was something that was really important to me. And so I had started researching where could I get some coach training. And I wanted to, because I was still where I was. We were going through a challenging time. And I thought, you know what? If I do this, it's not only going to help me where I am, it's going to help me create the future I want when that pivot happens, which will likely be soon. And I was really excited when my boss said to me, hey, we're going to bring in somebody to run this entire division. And I didn't want to go for that job. I actually didn't feel like I was the right person for it. And it would be based in D.C. None of those things were something I was going to do.
At that time, you were at Smithsonian.
I was at Smithsonian, which I love. Right.
For how long were you there?
I was there for the second time, because I've been there twice. I was at Smithsonian from 2000 to 2005, and it was an incredible experience. It was one of those environments where my values were 100% aligned with the place I'm at. Like, the idea that I could be working in a media role that was giving back to something that I really cared about. Like, this is fun. I did that for 5 years. And, you know, what happened near the end, and I will still remember this phone call I made to my mom on the way home. I'm crying, saying, Mom, I think I have to leave. And she's like, why? And I go, because I need to get digital experience or I'm going to be left behind, right? I was like, I got to go. And so I did. I went somewhere initially that didn't provide that. And then I went to Martha Stewart after that. So the opportunity to go back, and this is kind of an interesting situation. I left Smithsonian. I went somewhere that wasn't a fit for me. Culturally, it was a really bad fit. And it was a really bad fit almost immediately. There's a very strong boys club there. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be part of that. I don't even want to try. And actually, a conversation I had with a colleague where she said, hey, one of the things you might want to do is just go have lunch with so-and-so. And I thought, ew. And then I thought, she's right, though. She's right. I need to want to have lunch with him.
Because?
Because if I'm going to stay, that's what I have to do. I didn't want to do any of it. And so I thought, you got to get out of here because this is not where you belong. So I had started looking for a job, and something kind of helpful. They let me go 3 weeks before I started a job. So I had my severance and a paycheck from Martha Stewart at that point. And then my last boss at Martha Stewart brought in a CEO who came from metal management. Do I need to say more? You know, we're about to sell this thing off for parts, right?
Yeah.
It was so obvious to me the minute it happened. I went, oh, okay, wait, I know it's about to happen. It was a challenging time. And I ended up moving into the role to lead sales and marketing during that. I'm going to call it a transition period because that's what it was. It was like they were on the lookout for what they could do. And lo and behold, they ended up going back to the company. They did a partnership with the company that had fired me before.
Wow.
They said, hey, we really want you. And I'm like, I don't know that. That's not really true, but that's okay. I said to myself, you know what? It's November. I think I'd like to be set free in the spring. I'm going to go ahead and go there. I'm going to take care of my people because I was really clear that they could hear the tough stuff from me because it would come with tough love. So when they'd come in my office and be like, I think my job has changed, I'd be like, it has. They could hear it from me, and I'm happy to do that. I'm going to be the one that delivers that. Then I'm at Martha Stewart. They let me go. And at that point, I said to myself, I'm taking 6 months. I'm not looking for a job. What I did was I did a lot of informational conversation. I'm going to wait because the last thing I want to do is take the first thing that comes along. I want to have the space to really know what's going to really speak to me at this point in my career. I also was fortunate because I was the board chair of She Runs It, which is one of the biggest organizations that serves the advertising, media, MarTech, digital industry, supporting women at every stage of their careers. It's an amazing organization. And so that was perfect because I was highly engaged in everything that we were doing and able to be with people all the time. And it was so interesting because literally the week that I was saying to myself, I'm going to start looking, I got a phone call from the guy who was the CRO at Smithsonian saying, hey, this position is going to be open because I'm retiring the end of December.
So was this all based on relationship?
I knew him. Yeah, it was so funny because this is someone I really admire him. Steve Giannetti, he's a really good guy. He and I competed when he was at prevention and I was at health. And then the first time I was at Smithsonian, he was at National Geographic.
There you go.
Now he was at bigger brands, which was really fascinating. But he just said to me, "Hey, you know, this is going to be open, so it might be something you want to throw your hat in the ring for." And I was like, "Wow!" I had already made that list of the things that were going to be most important to me. My parents had moved near me because they needed help with my dad and Alzheimer's. I wasn't moving. When I made that short list of what was going to be important, I'm thinking, I got to stay close. I got to make this amount of money. And most importantly, it has to speak to me in a very big way in order for me to want to care. And when he called me, I was like, oh my goodness. Like,
So he was kind of handpicking his predecessor in a sense.
well, yes, and they have to interview a lot of people, but he let me know the position was available, right? So I was able to then interview along with others. But I think what was helpful is, look, Smithsonian is part of a pretty big organization.
Yeah.
And you have to know how to navigate that. Sometimes it doesn't move as fast as you'd like it to, but they would know I could handle that. I know what it looks like to move things forward in an environment that isn't necessarily operating the way every other one does.
How long were you there?
The second time, almost 7 years. Yeah, 7 years.
So when did you leave Smithsonian and why?
Well, they brought in a new person to run the organization. So in 2023, I knew that when she came in, she was going to have to reorg. And I knew that there wasn't going to be room for somebody who was at her level and mine.
Mm.
And that given the climate and what was happening, she could do both. She came in having responsibility for everything. I already had my leadership certification. I was already coaching nights and weekends. I was already building up my base, and I was prepared. So when that happened, June 23rd was my last day at Smithsonian. I was really ready for that.
So you started the coaching while you were at Smithsonian.
Yeah.
What was that light bulb moment to become a leadership coach, specifically a leadership coach based on your background and experiences?
I'm still involved in She Runs It. So my involvement in She Runs It over the years, I've been a mentor. They have a really amazing mentorship program that I think I have like 15 people I've mentored over the years. It could be more. And I have 2 right now that are beautiful humans. And I think what I was really noticing is that I have a need to support and help others. It's like a burning need inside of me. And I am particularly interested in women who are navigating what I like to call the messy middle. It's a stage of your career where you have increasing responsibility. You're responsible for the person above you, colleagues, the people below you. You may be new to an organization trying to fit in that way. Plus, you've got stuff at home. You might have kids. You might have an aging parent. And what happens to women in that moment, that's when the imposter syndrome probably is like the loudest because you really do feel like you're failing in a lot of places. And having been in environments like that where I lived it, I also found those times to be lonely. They were really lonely because you think you're supposed to be able to figure it out on your own. And that's the biggest mistake women make, is not get that board of directors. Find those people that are going to be either a mentor or get those people that you're going to reach out to who are going to tell you the truth. Because I also tell people, look, when you're really, really down, call the people who are going to build you up. There are days for lessons and there are days for, you know what, just right now, let me tell you what I need and let them tell you, right? But you also want to have those people around you who are going to be like, I don't know about that. Let's look at this. What about this? I think I was already seeing that. And I had started researching it in 21. It was already brewing. And I'm sure that some of it was related to that coaching experience I had, that I still remember what I got from that. Like
So
that is still with me.
now you're in the entrepreneurial world,
Yeah.
serving employees and
Yeah.
corporate
Yeah.
leaders, and you start a whole new brand, and it's called Choose Or LLC.
Yeah.
Why?
I think I've already shared how much I like the word choose and choice, right? Like you get to choose it. What if I could choose awe, wonder, and curiosity in every moment, regardless of how the world is operating around me or my internal state? Like, what if I could do that? What if I could be that inquisitive? Coaching is really all about helping others tap into their own wonder and curiosity. And so that came to me pretty quickly. And I thought, this has to be it because I can't let it go. And so that's what I chose.
So, are there any specific practices that you are helping others contribute to their growth and success specifically that you integrate into your work that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I use this micro practice that supports integrating mindfulness into the moments that you're already in, that can be integrated into your everyday life, so that you really don't have to say, oh my God, I'm going to have to find another 15 minutes today. You say that to somebody in the messy middle, and 15 minutes feels like 3 hours. But if you could actually say, you know what, this is 10 seconds. Close your eyes. Just listen to the sounds around you. Don't do anything else. Just listen to those sounds, right? That's an option, right? You can do that for 10 seconds. If you're on a conference call and somebody's triggering you, you can just rub your hands on something nearby. You could just tap into the sense of touch. So there's things that you can do. There's a program that I facilitate that is a 7-week program. And then we utilize that as we move into a traditional coaching relationship. So I use it in one-on-one coaching, but I also facilitate groups. And I'm excited because next year what I'm going to be doing is not only facilitating the group, but creating these office hours that will happen twice a month that you can stop in on. So you'll have the opportunity throughout the year, once a month, pop in and get a refresh of what we actually created during the base program that's 7 weeks. So I'm excited about that. And that's kind of new that I haven't done yet.
That's exciting.
In what you've been working on with the clients, have there been any success stories that you'd like to share?
I'm coaching someone who was really at an interesting stage, a little bit like mine. And really struggling with, do I stay or do I go? And really got to see staying was painful, suffering. Like it was literally, if I do that, that's what I'm choosing. And they took 6 months off, and they're doing what's called the El Camino. And when they come back, we're going to regroup to create what is coming after that. But for them, that was like true freedom. And I get to observe because we're connected on socials. I see all the posts that they do, and I'm like, oh, this is so fun.
But with your guidance,
Yeah.
she gave herself permission
Yeah. Yeah.
to take that pause
Right.
and to take that space
Right.
for herself to figure out
Yep.
what's next for her.
What's next?
Yep.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because that's all we're all figuring out.
Yep.
What's next, the next moment or the
Yep.
next day or month or year or 5 years,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I have another person who was also in a similar situation who really had loved what they did forever. And then all of a sudden was questioning where they were, questioning a lot of their own, like, am I really as good as I think I was? Like, what's happening? Why do I suddenly feel like I'm not doing a good job here? And what they were able to do is really pivot that conversation and create a whole other area that they are contributing to the organization where they are that is making a huge difference. And they tell me, like, wow, my experience now is completely different.
Something we talk about all the time on Between Over and Next is living your happiest, most fulfilled life. So how would you define a happy, fulfilled life, Amy?
For me, it's all about the people in my life. If I were to fast forward to the end of my life and look back, I'm going to say to myself, the moments where I got to be deeply connected with the people that I meet, and I don't have to know them. Like the idea that what if I could go through life really looking for ways to connect rather than looking at things where we're different or where we might be divided, but actually start with what do we have in common, but also just being surrounded by people that I love and adore.
If you could go back and offer advice to your younger self in your 20s, what would you say or what lessons do you wish you knew earlier?
It's so weird because I don't know if I really wished I knew it all earlier because I feel like it's part of the journey. You can't skip over it. Because even if I had told my younger self some of those things, she probably would have been like, what are you talking about?
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yet.
Because you
Right.
don't know what you don't know.
I don't look at any of those challenging times, and there's a number of them, but I don't look at them as like, oh, I would have wanted to avoid them. I think what I would want to say to her is, hey, listen, there are going to be times when the road feels a little rocky. You might feel like you got to zig when you wished you could have zagged, and like, you know what? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to learn something from it, and it's going to be okay. I wouldn't try to help her figure out that she isn't going to have to go through some of it because you kind of have to.
Well, we learned
yeah.
so much along the way.
Yeah.
It brings you where you are, here
Yeah.
today. So.
The one thing I think I would say, though, to her would be your body's going to tell you stuff that you didn't even know you needed to hear. I can think of the times when I took that painful job after I left health, and I was 34 and I got shingles. And nobody gets shingles at 34. I mean, really, that's not a thing. But I did. I remember the diagnosis. I had a book, actually from health, and it had this whole section on rashes. And I'm reading everything except the one on shingles, because how could I have shingles? I'm 34. My parents were over at the house at the time, and my dad goes, I think you should read this one. And I read it, and I go, what? Like, that's it. I have that. Oh, my God. But what did that do? Shut me down. I couldn't do anything. So your body, if you're listening to it along the way, you might not get to that point where it has to shut down. There might be something else you need to be thinking about and doing for yourself before you get there.
Makes sense.
Share what's next for Amy in the years ahead. What does that look like?
What it looks like is being a contribution to a lot of the people that I already know, to people I haven't even met yet. and just embracing the heck out of that.
That is so beautiful. I wish more people had that mindset and know that they can make a difference. Well, I am so happy we've reconnected.
Me too.
And I know that the best is yet to come.
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Good to be with you.
I love how Amy ended our time together with her answer of what's next for Amy and saying contribution. What a powerful word. To want to make a meaningful impact on the lives of others. What better way to be in any aspect of life?
The bottom line is here with Amy, it's clear from everything that she shared with us from early on to present day, her desire is to help others. And she mentioned it throughout her entire journey professionally, that she wanted to help others in whatever role she had. So to see her really fulfill her lifelong dream, desire, calling, whatever you want to label it, that's really what you're talking about, fulfillment.
She started off by saying that she got a degree in psychology. Well, so did you.
Right. She had thought about a continued path in that, right? That she had thought maybe she would be a counselor. Turns out she actually is a counselor. Right? That's what she's doing now. The universe has strange ways of working sometimes, but ultimately she's doing what she was meant to do. She took everything that she did truly as a stepping stone to what was next for her. Right to this very moment, she's taking that step in her new path as a coach.
And I
helping
love
others.
that she's focusing on that messy middle, and she defined it really well, because I don't think a lot of people are really thinking about that space between over and next, personally and professionally in their lives, of how to manage it, how to cope, how to not only survive, but thrive.
Yeah, we've said it time and time again. So once again, Holly, you picked
Thank you.
you picked good, from our past.
I am really grateful for the people that we've met, but actually being able to recognize that the stories we're sharing can actually help others think about their lives and their careers and their transitions throughout life, and knowing that you could do or be anything you want.
Truly. And I think now so more than ever, we're empowered with knowledge, we're empowered with tools, we're empowered with technology that for many of us is within reach. I think a computer and a connection to the internet kind of levels the playing field for a lot of people. So I think Amy, you can see, is really comfortable with where she is and doing what she's doing.
And is dedicating to serving others. So thank you, Amy, so much for being part of Between Over and Next. Thank you, Robert, for always being the best producer in the house. I love being in this studio with you. And I look forward to continuing this programming to help inspire others.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, thank you for tuning in and being a part of our audience here at Between Over and Next. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Between Over and Next. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it meaningful and insightful.
If you value it to be worthwhile, please share it with your friends and family.
We would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write a review for us. Your feedback will help us continue to create content that resonates with you.
And don't forget, in the show notes, you can find all the relevant links mentioned in this episode, from accessing free downloads to visiting our website and more.
If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Simply send us an email. Our email address is hello@hollyandrobert.com. We're always excited to connect with our listeners.
So until next time, thank you again for joining us on Between Over and Next.
Thank you for listening to Between Over and Next, the podcast that navigates the twists and turns of life with courage, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration. Tune in every Tuesday to hang out with Holli and Robert on your favorite podcast platform. Visit hollyandrobert.com and follow them on social media to ignite your passion and fuel your dreams.